Here's something that should scare every property investor, every small business owner, and frankly, every resident of a major city right now. An empty shop is not just a landlord's problem. It's not just bad luck or a tough retail environment or some line item in a commercial agency's vacancy report. An empty shop left there long enough, surrounded by enough other empty shops, is the first domino in a chain reaction that can take down an entire local economy. We're talking jobs, wages, house prices, population, the lot. And we're not talking theory here. We're talking documented, measurable, happening right now economic collapse in regional Australia and in some of the biggest cities in the United States. Stick around because by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how a for lease sign turns into a population exodus and what to watch for before it happens in your own backyard. My name is Richard and welcome to Ron's Industries, where we're pro-wealth, pro-growth and pro-real estate. And in this video, we're looking at the commercial vacancy doom loop. So let's start with the name, because economists actually have one for this. And it's a good one. It's called the urban doom loop. It was coined back in 2022 by a professor at Columbia Business School, a guy named Stijn van Nieuwenburg, and I probably got that wrong. And what he described was basically a vicious cycle with four moving parts. Picture a wheel. 1. Commercial vacancies go up. 2. That means fewer operating businesses. 3. Fewer operating businesses means fewer jobs. And 4. Fewer jobs means less money getting spent locally. Which brings us right back to point 1. More vacancies because there's even less demand for commercial space. Here's the analogy I want you to hold on to for this entire video. Think of a local economy like a campfire. Businesses are the logs, jobs are the flames, and spending is the oxygen. Take away the oxygen, which is people's disposable income, and the flames die down. Take away enough flames, and even good logs stop burning. Eventually, the fire's out, and everyone standing around it has to go find warmth somewhere else. That somewhere else is the bit that should worry you, because once people start leaving, once they vote with their feet, the campfire doesn't relight on its own. Van Nieuwenburg actually put it really simply. He said when governments have to cut spending because of this, it's less money for transportation, less money for education, for sanitation, for all the things that make cities attractive. So you end up in this position where the very things that would fix the problem are the first things to get cut because there's no money left to pay for them. That's the loop. Vacancy causes closure. Closures cause unemployment. Unemployment causes less spending causes more vacancy. Round and round it goes, and it gets faster each time around, not slower. Now, if you're new to investing, you might be thinking, okay, sure, less spending, that sounds bad, but how does one closed cafe actually cause a suburb to empty out? This is where we need to talk about something called the multiplier effect. And don't worry, it's way simpler than it sounds. Imagine a $50 note. You spend it at the local hairdresser. The hairdresser uses part of that $50 to buy lunch from the cafe next door. The cafe owner uses part of that money to pay their staff. Her staff spend part of that wage at the local pub on a Friday night. That $150 note just did the work of, conservatively say, $150 or $200 worth of local economic activity because it kept circulating throughout the neighborhood. Now, let's run that in reverse. This is called the divider effect, and it's the multiplier's evil twin. Let's say an employer closes down, say a power station or a major office tenant. That $50 note doesn't even enter the local economy in the first place anymore. The hairdresser doesn't get the haircut booking, the cafe doesn't get the lunch order, the pub doesn't get that Friday night crowd. One job loss doesn't just affect one household, it ripples outwards and quietly switches off 3 or 4 other jobs that were depending on that spending. Now, say what you like about casual spending, but this is stuff we know is just simply true. It's reality as we know it, and we can all see it. This is exactly why vacancy rates matter so much to investors. A rising vacancy rate isn't just more stock on the market, it's a flashing warning light that businesses are losing confidence, scaling back or shutting their doors completely. Think of the vacancy rate as the patient's pulse. A slightly elevated pulse is something you keep an eye on. A rapidly climbing pulse, that's when you start asking serious questions about what's going on underneath. And we've got research showing how dependent some cities are on this circulating spending. The Brookings Institute found that commuters increase a city's daytime population by an average of 19%. And in some cities in America, like Boston, Hartford, and Washington, D.C., it's over 50%. So when those commuters stop showing up, whether through remote work or job losses, that's not a 5% dip in foot traffic. In some places, that's losing half the people who used to walk past the shop front every single day. Now, let's bring this back home because this isn't just an American story. It's playing out in Victoria right now. In 2024, more than 129,000 Victorian businesses shut their doors. Let that sink in for a second. That's not 129,000 businesses over a decade. This is in just 1 year. When we run the math on that, that's over 350 businesses closing their doors every single day in one state. It's not just small operators that are wobbling. Company insolvencies in Victoria hit 4,242 in the 2024-25 financial year, up 48% on the year before. That's not a soft patch, that's an acceleration. The job numbers tell the same story. Victoria's private sector actually shed 3,900 jobs recently, the first time that's happened since the pandemic lockdowns. And Victoria currently holds the highest unemployment rate of any state in the country at 4%. Now, here's the analogy for anyone newer to investing who's wondering why this matters to you specifically. Think of the state economy like a share portfolio. If one stock in your portfolio is underperforming everything else in the index, you start asking the question about why. Is it temporary or is it structural? Right now, Victoria is the underperforming stock in the National Economic Index. The AI Group's chief executive actually used the word irrelevant to describe how international business is starting to view the state, citing high taxes, heavy regulation, and rising costs as the reason capital is looking elsewhere. And if you want the clearest, most painful case study of what happens when this spiral runs its full course, you need to look at the Latrobe Valley. Back in the late 1980s, around 11,000 people worked in the valley's power industry. By 2001, after privatisation, that number had collapsed to about 2,600. The population dropped by the equivalent of 9% of the entire region almost overnight. 3 in 10 families in Maui and Morwell had no breadwinner in the house at all. Then, just when the region had started to stabilise, the Hazelwood Power Station shut its doors in 2017. Another 750 direct jobs gone, plus 300 more in supporting industries. One local business owner running a beauty salon in Traralgon said it better than any economist could. She said, "The people aren't spending anymore. You can look around the streets now, and the street is so quiet." Quiet streets. That's what the end of the doom loop actually looks like in real life. It's not a headline, it's just quiet streets where there used to be people. Unemployment in the valley hit 11.2%. Youth unemployment hit almost 20%. Nearly 1 in 4 kids under 15 were living in a household where nobody had a job. That's the human cost sitting underneath every one of these statistics. Let's hop across the Pacific because California is currently running the largest live experiment on this exact mechanism anywhere in the developed world. San Francisco is the textbook case. Before COVID, about 470,000 people commuted into downtown San Francisco every single day. Office vacancy was a tight 4.7%. Landlords were laughing. When we fast forward to the end of 2024, office vacancy peaked at 36.9%. That's not a typo. More than a third of San Francisco's office space sits empty. Budget deficit projections are now north of $1.4 billion by 2027. Here's an analogy that might land for anyone who's renovated a property. Imagine you've got a rental with one tenant covering the mortgage, the insurance, and the maintenance fund. Then that tenant leaves, and you discover that the one tenant was effectively also paying the gardener, the cleaner, and the handyman down the street because they always tipped well and recommended the local guy to their friends. San Francisco didn't just lose office tenants, it lost the spending that flowed out from those office tenants into 100 small businesses around them. Even the city's own chief economist confirmed it. The vacancy crisis is hitting business tax revenue and transit ridership simultaneously. Two separate income streams, both drying up from the exact same cause. Then there's Oakland, which shows you what happens when this spiral gets a second ingredient added to it, and that's crime. Major office buildings in Oakland are sitting above 50% vacancy. Some have literally been mothballed or switched off, abandoned, because owners can't justify spending their money to attract tenants who aren't going to be coming. The city has lost 14% of its paying business tax accounts in just 3 years. A local community advocate summed up the spiral in one sentence that I think is the best plain English description of this entire phenomenon you'll ever hear. She said, "The doom loop means businesses leave because of crime and problems. There's less money to hire more police to solve the problems, and down you tumble." Now let's read that again. Businesses leave because of crime. Less business means less tax revenue. Less tax revenue means you can't afford more police. Less police means more crime, and the wheel keeps turning faster every single time it goes around. And zoom out to the state level. California has now led the entire United States in domestic outmigration for 6 years running. Over 216,000 people left the state on net in the most recent year alone. Los Angeles County lost more than 53,000 residents in a single year, the biggest single country population loss anywhere in the United States. People aren't leaving California because they dislike the weather. They're leaving because the math stopped working for them. So why does any of this matter to you if you're not a counselor, an economist, or a state treasurer? Because if you're investing in property, residential or commercial, the vacancy rate in the area you're buying into is no longer just a number on a report. It's a leading indicator. It's the smoke before the fire, or in this case, the smoke before the fire actually goes out. Here's the simplest way I can put it for anyone earlier in their investing journey. Don't just look at the yield on the building. Look at the pulse of the precinct around it. Is foot traffic dropping? Are nearby shops turning over tenants every 6 months? Is the local council quietly cutting services? Those are the early warning signs, the same ones that showed up in the Latrobe Valley and in San Francisco years before the headlines caught up. The window to act, whether that's choosing not to buy into a declining precinct or as a business owner deciding not to sign a 5-year lease into a softening area, is much wider before the spiral gets moving than once it's already turning. Once enough vacancies stack up, once enough jobs disappear, once enough families decide to leave, the momentum becomes very, very hard to reverse. Ask anyone who's tried to revitalize a regional town after its one major employer closed. So here's the takeaway I want you to leave with today. An empty shop is never just an empty shop, not when it's been empty for over 6 months. It's a data point, and when enough of those data points line up, in Morwell, in Oakland, in San Francisco, or potentially even in your own town, they tell a story about where that local economy is heading, often years before it becomes obvious to anyone else. So if you found this valuable, hit subscribe and drop your comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.